In just about 28 minutes from now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi will begin his address to the nation, his first address post-Operation Sindur, which was started as punitive strikes in Pakistan on their terror infrastructure resulted in a 48-hour conflict, full-blown war-like situation between India and Pakistan. Prime Minister would be speaking for the very first time. Remember, he has been we've seen the number of meetings every single day throughout the last 4-5 days that the Prime Minister has taken. In fact, we were told that the Prime Minister monitored the Operation Sindur, the beginning of it, throughout the night as well. My colleague Aishwarya is with me at this moment. This is going to be an important address to the nation. Aishwarya, Prime Minister speaking for the first time. Many were wondering, while Shehbaz Sharif, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, has spoken not one, not two, but multiple times to, in his country, prematurely also jumping around and claiming victory. When will Prime Minister Narendra Modi speak? And tonight, in just about 27 minutes, that is going to happen.
Well, Ankit, after Pahalgam terror attack, it was Prime Minister Narendra Modi who spoke for the very first time at a rally in Bihar. And he switched from Hindi to English to address globally, to address the world about India's intention to hit terrorists, to punish them, to identify them. And that's what the objective of Operation Sindoor was. Indian armed forces were given free hand, and India proved that they can hit and strike the terror infrastructures, be it on the mainland of Pakistan or in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. It is those terrorists who were neutralized, their infrastructures were demolished, there were specific targets that the Indian Armed Forces launched, and of course the Indian Armed Forces also provided every evidence to the world that how India has attacked them deeply. And it was after a full-blown 48 hours of the conflict between Indian Armed Forces and Pakistani Army, the ceasefire was announced. But India made a statement that no terrorist activity will be tolerated in the near future. The sources in the government have earlier stated that it is Prime Minister's straight message, a red line has been drawn, that in the near future, if there is a terror activity in the country, then that will be considered as an act of war and India will act accordingly. Remember, Prime Minister Narendra Modi holding series of meetings, cheering those, reviewing what is happening along with the line of control and also at the international border. Prime Minister Narendra Modi had been chairing several rounds of meetings with the top security officials, and when the nod came in for Operation Sindoor, it was Prime Minister who day and night monitored the situation. Yes, of course, at this point in time, there is entire Pakistani media, the Western media, who is trying to propagate and peddle the fake narrative around entire Operation Sindoor, but Indian Armed Forces have given every visual proof to it. It has been come on the visual evidence, the proof by the border security force, which is there out in open when Pakistani's army was have been firing. It was those terrorists who want to come into the Indian territory, and those were neutralized as well.
Right.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi would be speaking for the first time, and he will tell the objectives of Operation Sindoor that was successful in its mission. The Indian Armed Forces had been lauded, just not by the government but by the opposition as well. And of course, as they said, justice is delivered, and now all eyes would be on Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
Thank you so much, Aishwarya, for joining us with all those details. Just to understand, because ladies and gentlemen, of course, one part of it will be the military operations that took place and what compelled Prime Minister to take those decisions. One part also is of expectation of a political fallout of this, and possibly an upper hand that the BJP and the Prime Minister could claim. I'm being joined at this moment by Amitabh Tiwari, political strategist, who is joining us at this moment. We also have Dr. Tara Kartha, former Director, National Security and Council Secretariat, to understand the implications globally of this operation. We'll also be going across to Neerja Chaudhary, senior journalist, in just a short while from now. Amitabh, before I come to you, let me start with Dr. Tara Kartha. Lot has been said, ma'am, about whether you want to call it the public relation fallout of this operation for India globally, and the way it has been presented. While Pakistan on one hand is claiming victory within their own country, living in that fantasy world, how is this entire operation and what India has done being seen across the globe?
See, first and foremost, the whole titling of Operation Sindur, that was, I believe, PM's idea. That was an emotional message inside the country. It was so solid. Number two is outside, you've sent a message, I will fight under the nuclear overhang. We will still get our objective despite this huge, talk of nuclear weapons and etc. All that stuff there. We still got our objectives through. Number three is a lot of people are going to find it very difficult to digest that. Because that, sorry to say this, but that a brown country can actually do this and do its work thoroughly well is difficult for people to actually accept. But I would give credit to our international academics and things to understand. Maybe they should study this war, see how, in terms, like I said, I think in another channel, what marked this war, what marked it was the selection and maintenance of aim. That is the fundamental principle of war. You said, I will attack terrorist camps, and that is precisely what you did.
Right.
So that is brilliant. And your Ukraine and Gaza should tell you, the second brilliant thing is you also walked out at the right time.
Yes.
Amitabh,
let me bring you in at this moment. What are the two messages? One, of course, for the domestic, one, of course, for a message across the border, which the military, under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, has been able to send. What about the message to the domestic audience? What are you expecting in the address tonight?
See, clearly in the address tonight, I think Prime Minister Modi will clearly, first of all, thank the armed forces and the people and the opposition parties for their unwavering support. Secondly, I think he would lay down clearly what were the objectives of Operation Sindur, what are our accomplishments, how we have exceeded the expectations or achieved the objectives. Thirdly, how we have sent a clear signal to Pakistan, as we have also announced that any act of terrorism in the future will be considered as an act of war. So what is the strategic importance of this statement? How it is also a message that I think he will also dwell upon the fact as to why India accepted a ceasefire at this point of time after the accomplishment of the objectives, perhaps because he has already made a statement in the past that this is not an era of war. Correct. When he has made a position, such a position during the Russia-Ukraine conflict, I think he will try to harp on that factor. So there are many facets of this which he will bring before the people, and there will be something new which he will bring to the table, perhaps. Which the DGMO.
Can I also probe you, Amitabh, a little bit? Can I also probe you a little bit about the timing of this address? Because, like I was asking Aishwarya, throughout this entire conflict, at least from 7th onwards, there was a lot of demand, at least there was a lot of expectation of the Prime Minister to come out, speak to the nation, tell our country what is going on as the hostilities were rising, when the tensions were rising at that point of time. The Prime Minister chose not to. We kept seeing the visuals of him in the meetings, so on and so forth. And then, of course, after the announcement of the ceasefire understanding, 24 hours after that ceasefire understanding, the Prime Minister decides to speak. So tell our viewers a little bit more about what do you think about the timing of this address?
No, essentially, he had clearly...
Go ahead, Amitabh.
Essentially, he had clearly given the armed forces the powers and the right to respond accordingly. So what he has done is that, of course, he has led this operation, but he has given the armed forces on the ground who have fought this this limited war, who were at the forefront, to take the highlight, I would say, to a certain extent, by holding pressure from the MEA, now with the DGMO. And now, once the limited war is over, we have had a calm night yesterday, and the operation, at least this phase of the operation, is over. Now he has chosen this time to come and speak in front of the Indian populace, and also give a message perhaps to the global audience and to the audience in
Okay.
Pakistan as what could be the future course of action, and why he took this decision
Right.
to take a ceasefire at this point
Dr.
of time.
Kartha, do you also see somewhere in Prime Minister's speech today a message to the global audience? Because a lot has been written, spoken, critiqued about the fact that the ceasefire understanding was announced by United States President Donald Trump even before both the countries, in fact, formally spoke anything about it. India then, of course, through sources have been saying that this was initiated by Pakistanis, brokered by America, because they went running to America after we hit them very, very hard. But that is also a debate that the Prime Minister would also want to put a stop or an end to, that there is no way that there is a scope for any third party to mediate between India and Pakistan.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think there's any question of that. That while we are appreciative, I mean, I think this is what he's going to say, is that we appreciate the US role. I mean, I'm talking of the NSA, Marco Rubio, who did play a role. I mean, let's give him the credit where it is due. But the point is, we can do this, and there is also a sort of on social media, there's a lot of talk that why did we stop? There is very little understanding on the ground of the seriousness of war. So I think it's when we stopped, when we did, was brilliant, and that has to be conveyed. And I think the PM who has been helming all these things, he is not a PM who will sit at home and let things slide. He is at the leading from the front. He would know this, and I think that message will also go out. We got our objectives. We are happy with the US, but however, we will make our own decisions. No question of mediation on Kashmir. We are done. Article 370, we are done. That's it.
Neerja Chaudhary, with us finally. Neerja, thank you for joining us at this moment. Let me start by asking you, of course, a big moment as far as our country's history and the chapters being written are concerned. What do you expect from Prime Minister's speech this evening? Are you expecting like a claiming big victory kind of a speech which will be loaded with a lot of political connotations for the domestic audience as well?
Yeah, I think the Prime Minister, being Prime Minister, he will probably strike high notes after Operation Sindur, which was a very evocative one. And it had the support of women, it had the support of families. People felt enough is enough signal had to be given to Pakistan. But if you go out on the street and talk to the panwala, the driver, the cleaning woman, ordinary people, the villager, they are happy that the war is not going to be a prolonged one. The war has come to an end. We struck at the terror camps, and we showed Pakistan that this, it would have to pay a high price if it went in for or sponsored terror attacks. So I think overall, certainly it has resonated with women in large numbers. That Operation Sindur has certain connotations. And with families who felt the barbarity of what had happened in Pahalgam, which had really this time terrorized the women of India. And somewhere their loss had to be avenged because their husbands were killed in front of them.
Yes.
At point blank range. And therefore there was grief and pain and anger in the country. So that loss had to be avenged. And I think by, precision strikes, India did that.
Yes.
But India did not want a war. And it made that very clear even after the precision strikes. So yes, given all this, but certainly the BJP leadership has come in for criticism, with America. Why did it go in for ceasefire so quickly. There were people amongst its own ranks that felt, Pakistan would be brought on its knees. So maybe it became a victim of its own shrill rhetoric by some of the people in the BJP.
Yes.
And also that, this third party intervention, I think the Prime Minister will probably clarify. Kashmir has it come center stage again instead of terror.
Okay.
Will India and Pakistan be hyphenated? These are all question marks.
Yes.
And I think somewhere the Prime Minister will probably clarify this evening.
May I ask you, or just stretch this further into the political message, Neerja? Already we are seeing news reports that the BJP has planned Tiranga Yatras across the country coming May 13th and onwards. There is somewhere, of course, it's not for the first time. Every political leadership, after what they would perceive, or at least there is a strategic military objective which has been achieved, there is going to be some political dividend that they would want out of that. How do you see that playing out in the days to come? And also the opposition, which has been quite completely supporting the government so far, but now, of course, as the tensions of the war-like situation would come down, the heat in the political discourse will rise.
Yeah, absolutely. The opposition will play its role and should play its role. And you will go back to the cacophony of our India's democracy. So that is to be expected. And of course, there are no elections around the corner. It's Bihar 6 months down the line. And of course, elections next year. But Tiranga Yatras, yes, I think national unity, national resolve should be the theme that should be pursued. I hope very much that there'll be no attempt to equate Pakistan with the Muslims in India. Because the Muslims and Hindus have stood as one, even though the design of the Pahalgam terror attacks was to create a backlash in the country. And that was defeated. Kashmiris have spoken with the rest of India. There we've seen women power in evidence. So I think we should encash on all those things to move forward very resolutely.
Amitabh, very quickly, let me bring you in, because even though the opposition this time, and we have seen at least a sense of responsibility across the political aisle when it came to these kind of tensions between India and Pakistan. Opposition, in fact, saying that they have complete faith and support they've given to the Prime Minister and the armed forces. But there was one demand that the opposition kept raising, at least that they said that in the all-party meetings, Prime Minister should have been present. Now there is also a demand of an all-party meeting. Do you see some sort of an addressal by the Prime Minister in the upcoming address as well?
I think clearly the opposition is demanding demanding a joint parliament session at this point of time. Maybe a joint parliament session is not warranted because a lot of things cannot be discussed openly about the strategic initiatives and the military operations. But I think the government in the days to come is likely to call for an all-party meeting. They had called an all-party meeting to apprise them of this situation after the Pahalgam attack and had taken into confidence. And I think the NDA government is likely to hold an all-party meeting soon and assuage the concerns of the opposition with regard to this ceasefire and many questions they have in mind. However, the opposition as well, I hope and that they would also probably join in the celebrations, because India needs to put up a united front and a united face to the global audience and to Pakistan on this historic occasion.
Well, days will tell whether we are able to send that message, or is it too much to ask, as Neerja put it, in the cacophony of the Indian democracy. As the dust settles and the heat comes down on the international border between India and Pakistan, I presume fireworks to begin very, very soon within our borders between the political parties. Thank you so much, Neerja, Amitabh, and Dr. Kartha, for joining me at this moment. Ladies and gentlemen, just about less than 10 minutes, 8 minutes at this moment, the clock is showing on NDTV. Prime Minister will speak, and post that, of course, the big takeaways, the complete dissection of what the Prime Minister says to the nation coming up here on NDTV. I'm slipping into a short break. Stay tuned.